moderate the discussions on behalf of the UN Habitat India office. In today's gathering, we would like to discuss the topic building climate smart cities through data-driven integrated planning. I would now request Ms. Parul Agarwal, Country Program Manager from UN Habitat India, to give a keynote address for the event.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session today. Today's theme could not on building climate smart cities through data-driven integrated planning could not be more timely, um, given the focus of urbanization in urban areas and its contribution to the climate crisis that we're experiencing, has been spotlighted in the sixth IPCC report that was published just a few months ago. Cities consume over 2/3 of the world's energy, and the scenario is no different in India. The biannual urban update reports that from India indicate that indeed the urban sector's consumption of energy is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, followed by transport and mobility. The urbanization in India is only beginning. Our current statistics indicate that only 1/3 of India is urbanized and is projected to become 50% urbanized by 2050. This will occur in tandem with a growing contribution of India's cities to the GDP, also projected at 70% of the total contribution from of our GDP. While both of these development scenarios present a very optimistic picture, we need to ensure that our trajectory for growth and development is sustainable, it is climate resilient, and we learn from the downfall or the drawbacks that we have experienced in the past and globally. The first Monday of every October is celebrated as World Habitat Day, where we highlight an important urban theme every year. This year's theme is accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. And towards this, we are organizing a series of events which are looking at an interdisciplinary approach to climate change and its impact on different disciplines from the urban sector. And today's session is one of such thematic focus in which we want to prioritize climate action. And through our very distinguished panel of experts and speakers, we want to learn how through our everyday work, through our planning management practices, we can make some impactful changes in this domain. So with that, I hand over back to Ram, and look forward to listening from all the panelists and experts today.
Thank you, Parul. To start the discussion, I would first like to start with a poll where I would request the attendees to take up a quick 30-second poll. A poll is on your screen, which is basically which stakeholder group do you represent. If you can select the choices given here, we will be able to know what is the mix of the audience today, and we can contextualize our discussions and focus on some of the aspects based on this. So we see that we have a good participation from non-government organizations today. We have good participations from academia and research institutions and other groups. So it's a good debate which can happen from a point of view of NGOs, academic and research institutions today. Thank you for giving your inputs on the poll. Now I would like to uh, welcome Jaya. Jaya is Director Urban Development at WRI India. She has over 16 years of experience in urban sector. She provides strategic leadership to urban planning initiatives at WRI India. Her work revolves around advancing sustainable development goals in Indian cities through knowledge building and on-ground impactful interventions. Welcome, Jaya. Over to you to share your insights and experience on WRI's work in the areas of integrated area planning to build resilient cities.
Thank you, Ram, and also thank you, Parul, for inviting me to this talk. Is my screen visible? I'm just going to go full screen now.
Yes, Jaya.
All right, great. So to start off with, and this is something that actually Parul already mentioned, and you mentioned, Ram, is that, just to give a backdrop of, sort of the urbanization challenges, where does India stand right now? This is kind of where India is in its urbanization trajectory. So it's actually starting to take off. And when you look at other, cities, other countries, China, Mexico, Brazil, Latin American cities, a lot of them, they are already very highly urbanized. So obviously, when we are talking about the next sort of pressures on urban growth and urbanization over here, as you can see in the global map, basically South Africa and Southeast Asian countries are going to be the most, are going to be the ones most urbanizing. Yes, yes.
I think your slides are not changing. Can you try and open the file again?
Yeah, I think it's a heavy file. So what I'll do is I'll keep it on. Can you see it now?
Yes, yeah, it's visible now.
So I'll just keep it in this mode and not go to full screen, if that's okay.
Yeah, that should be okay.
Yeah, because I think there's a problem here. All right. So yes, so basically, like I said, India is basically now just taking off in its urbanization trajectory. And when you look at this map, it shows you, that Africa and Southeast Asian countries are going to be where a lot of the urbanization is going to be happening. We also know from the IPCC report and some of the other studies that a lot of this urbanization is going to happen in coastal cities in India and also, across Asia. The other thing is that, the urbanization is not going to be hand in hand with economic growth. So while some of the high income countries will, go into higher incomes and, their per capita GDPs will rise, that will not be true for poorer and developing countries. So when you look at Indian urbanization, two things, right? That it's messy and it's hidden. When you look at where this growth is happening, it's happening typically outside the municipal boundaries of cities. So these are the top 10 cities of India, top 12, 10 here. And all of the thing that you see in red and orange is where the most recent urban growth has happened. It's outside. And therefore, it's messy because it is not planned. All of the growth is going into areas which are not planned, which don't have adequate services. And it's hidden because when you're taking stock of urbanization in these cities, these numbers often don't get counted. All right, and so basically when we're talking about urban sprawl and the quantum of urban sprawl, this is the number that we're looking at. This is the amount of built up, about 30 square kilometers that we're adding to our cities every year. Sorry, I'm just having problems going through. Yeah. And when we look at where we are building, it's mostly happening. The map on the right shows you the sort of blue-green infrastructure. This is Bangalore. We are building on top of our blue-green infrastructure. We're building on top of lakes and on top of urban spaces, because as we go and expand on the outskirts of the city, we're obviously, infringing upon some of the environmentally sensitive areas. And so what we have as a result of this, the kind of flooding that you see in Bangalore with just very little rain. And also this is a consistent pattern, and we have this dichotomy going on in terms of climate change, where we have, excess water, so we have floods and we have droughts. This is the Chennai floods of 2015. They were deemed to be, one of the most expensive floods in terms of the economic losses, about 3 billion USD, and also the amount of, toll that it took on lives and livelihoods. Exactly, there's also water shortages. India, unfortunately, ranks, very high amongst the most water-stressed countries in the world. And there's also the question of deteriorating air quality. Now, 1/3 of all the deaths which happen annually in India are directly attributed to air pollution. So that tells you about, how bad it is. And, because this is Urban October, just to talk about, this is an urban heat map for Mumbai for the month of October. This was last year. And what we did is, look at two areas. One is Dharavi, which is one of these largest, slums in Asia. And then we're looking at, the neighboring Matunga, which is a well-off neighborhood. And there is a distinct 5-degree temperature difference between these two neighborhoods, right? So when you look at who's at the forefront of climate change, it is typically the urban poor who are getting pushed into this and who are getting pushed out of their livelihoods and who it is impacting the most. So basically, the persisting problems in cities which risk lock-in are continuing to be congestion, sprawl, and inefficiency. And the problem is that these decisions, once cities make these decisions, urban areas make these decisions, you're logged into them for a really long time. So for a whole generation, 30 to 70 to 150 years, once you build a community, once you build a highway, a bridge, those decisions are there to stay. And therefore, you have to make those decisions very carefully. This is also in the backdrop of the funding and financing situation for cities. And when we look at municipal budgets, Indian cities, the ones in the green sort of oval here, have some of the lowest per capita municipal budgets, which means that there is very little money in the public coffer to be spending per capita, whether it's on infrastructure or service delivery. And we are also, we have these challenges of service delivery themselves, where you have this water stress that we talked about. The amount of waste that is treated is not adequate, so most of it goes to the landfills. There's a huge building energy consumption with the amount of building stock that is currently there. And we are going to be adding about 35 billion square meters of new building by 2050. So how do you manage that? Also looking at policy, like while 10% of people are, there's a private car usage, a lot of the policy is directed towards, roads and towards private cars. And then there is the question of, governance. And basically, while the 74th Amendment, was done a long time back, but, in terms of empowering the lowest level of authorities, city authorities and jurisdictions, that has not yet happened. And so basically, there's this jurisdictional disparities. This just goes to show you how things can become dysfunctional when you have service provider jurisdictions which don't align. And this is the case of Bangalore, where you look at municipal services as it relates to BBMP, then water supply and the bus services, etc. They all have different jurisdictions. And basically, ULBs have not been empowered with funds, functions, and functionaries to be able to carry on their work. On the climate side, of course, India is one of the third largest GHG emitters, and half of it, of course, originates in urban areas. And the per capita emissions is 1/3 of global average. So while per capita is low, but we as a country, because of our population, because of our size, because of our needs, are a very high emitter. And basically, if you're looking to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we're looking at having to make some really drastic changes in the way that we function, in the way that our building sector, our transport sector operates, and to really make some drastic changes in terms of policy, in terms of how we implement plans and projects. On top of all of this, we've also had the impacts of the pandemic, and there has been, for example, the job losses. About 4.1 million youth lost their job. There were so many deaths. The pandemic had disproportionate impact on migrants, and it was dubbed as the most or the worst recession since independence. So right now the question is this, that how do you tackle climate change and the health crisis in sort of the backdrop of the urbanization which is continuing to happen and which will make cities grow more and more. Now, the global climate change targets are not possible without the transformation of cities, clearly, because one, 70% of the GHG emissions globally come from cities. And second, some of these sectors like buildings and transport contribute hugely, and cities are where they are most present or most active. But in terms of opportunity, 75% of India's 2050 infrastructure is yet to be built. And how we build that infrastructure, how we design it, is going to have a huge impact on how our future looks and how resilient we are. So basically, when we're talking about, the three problems that face the Anthropocene right now. So basically, one is, how do you adapt to climate change? How do you mitigate climate change? How do you respond to that? The second is how do you protect your biodiversity? And the third is how do you ensure human well-being? Cities where you need to do these three things is, how do you create connected, compact, clean cities? And most of all, how do you make them resilient? 5 things that I'm just going to quickly propose. The first one is, access to basic urban services for all. So unless we close the basic services divide between those who have and those who have not, I think we are going to be in, huge problems coming into the future, and it's going to be impactful because it has impacts on basically inclusivity and ensuring equity in our cities. And there are things which are happening. For example, if you look at Mumbai, and this is just some mapping that we have done, 60% of Mumbaikars have transit access within 1 kilometer of walkable distance. But London and cities elsewhere have about 80 or 90% of mass transit within their access. So can we improve that, first of all? Second, looking at, for example, access to amenities. This is a map of Kochi, which looks at which neighborhoods have good access to public open spaces, to playgrounds, etc., which are walkable neighborhoods, and those that aren't, which are in pink for the most part. And so how do you improve access to amenities in these neighborhoods? The second is how do you create livable and connected neighborhoods? And why it is important is, one, you should be able to function, and it is a matter of productivity. But second, it is also a matter of attracting talent and skilled workers to the city. And those are the ones who will, those are the people who will contribute to the economy and to the growth of the city. And so therefore, how do you do that? There are various initiatives which are going on. Transit-oriented development has picked up in many cities. There are policies and regulations around that. This is the map of Bangalore, and these circles basically show you where the major job locations are, and those red dotted, the yellow line with the red dots around it basically shows you where the current metro access is. So a lot of the major office nodes are located away from where the actual mass transit system is, and so the point is, how do you bring that closer? Is there a way to develop, assess development potential around these metro station areas and bring jobs and densities closer to these station areas? There is also improvements that need to happen at the neighborhood level. For example, improvements with open spaces, with intersections. How do you reduce? There's a lot of fatality which happens due to accidents. How do you minimize that? So basically, how do you create these livable neighborhoods? The third is essentially integrating resilient blue-green infrastructure in our cities. And this again is looking at Kochi. On the left side, you have the heat risk map of Kochi, which tells you that a third of the population is exposed to temperature above 30 degrees Celsius. And what that means is beyond a certain temperature, there's a loss of productivity. And so, how do you kind of address that? And the second thing is about the flood risk. And a quarter of the population of Kochi lives within these floodplains. So how do you manage that using nature-based interventions, using nature-based solutions, making sure that whatever you're planning is resilient? And so how do you engage community? How do you create participatory methods by which restoration can happen, by which nature-based solutions can be mainstreamed? The fourth one is about city-region planning. And this is important because we're looking at balanced regional growth, and even within cities, where will the jobs come? Where will they locate? Delhi is set to become the largest agglomeration in the world in just a few decades. And so how will that be managed? And this is some of the work that we've been doing around employment trends in the Delhi NCR region. What are the key economic drivers? What is the potential for job growth? How can these job locations be better serviced, better skilled manpower available to them? There's also work that we've done in Hyderabad, for example, to say that, if there are new economic clusters which are locating, what does the connectivity look like? So this basically tells you that from the Hyderabad city center, how far is an economic cluster? How quickly can people access those jobs? And so therefore, where should the focus of planned amenities and services be? And finally, the last one is basically about leveraging data for decision making. A lot of what I showed you in terms of maps and graphics is, data for decision making. But this basically, for example, is showing you the built up and ecological changes that have been happening in Surat. And the thing is, how do you bring back biodiversity to address flood risk, to address the kind of heat risks that Surat experiences? What can be done better over here? And here is an example of how road safety assessments have been done for the city of Mumbai to do the black spot analysis to basically figure out, where are the accidents happening? How can those areas be better? So, how do you take all of this data-driven discourse to decision-making, to informing decision-making about what's important in cities. And finally, what I'll leave you with is this, that, what can be learned from cities that have transformed? There's the classic case of Medellin in Colombia, which was the crime capital of the world at one point. And there was Surat, which was hit by the plague, and, it just completely had a really bad innings in terms of, how governance and all the issues were kind of being handled, and how these cities have now transformed. Medellin is one of the most livable cities in Latin America, and Surat has completely transformed its image to become one of the cleanest, best planned city. And they've done many things. So basically looking at data monitoring, looking at e-governance, looking at good urban planning, good urban design interventions in their community. So there are things that need to be learned from all of these cities as well. And basically, the point is that, all of these things that we are trying to do in cities, if we want transformative change, first we have to realize that the outcomes are interlinked. So whether we're looking at how do you increase productivity, how do you address climate change and have better quality of life for all, and it all depends on, looking at proactive planning versus reactive planning. How can you go ahead, look at, new planning tools and devices? How can you look at, for example, strategic planning and local area planning as a way to address, what's happening in our cities? And finally, looking at stakeholder collaboration and capacity, mostly from the standpoint of governance and finance, because private finance and locally driven finance is something that we'll have to look at very closely if we want to put in sustainable solutions in our cities. So I will leave you with that. I'll stop here, Ram. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaya, for such a wonderful presentation. Indeed, the spatial planning is a cornerstone of sustainability in our cities. The urban form which these cities take, the kind of densities which cities pick up, have a big impact on all the aspects, be it greenhouse gas emissions, or be it equity and efficiency aspects of city governance, city management, and city planning. So very well narrated, and a lot of good examples that you have shared with us and our audience in terms of what is happening across various cities, and how these issues are being seen. And I really like the 5-pointer agenda which you have given, which covers quite a bit of interesting areas of intervention, and especially how data-driven decision making can actually cut across all these themes. So thank you, Jaya, for that. We'll come back to you with questions from audience in some time. So I'll request our audience to please keep on posting questions in Q&A section, or in chat section, or in comment section. Our team will pick it from there, and will share these questions with our esteemed panelists. Now I would like to move to the next part of our discussion. So we will go ahead with the panel discussion after this context setting. Before we get into that, I would request our team to start another poll, which is the second poll. The poll is, what is the most effective strategy to achieve low carbon development? So what do you think are the areas which should be targeting for achieving low carbon development in our cities? Do you think it should be integrated urban planning? Do you think it should be advanced technology applications and service delivery, nature-based solutions for water and wastewater management, green buildings and clean mobility options, or other options? So the audience that we have today, I think we have, yeah, so the poll is on. Yes. Please I'm requesting you to please take up the poll so that we can understand your priorities. Okay, so we have received 40% of the audience feel that it's integrated urban planning approach, which can help us do the low carbon development. And second most popular choice is green building and mobility, which actually consumes a large amount of energy and has great impact on clean mobility solutions. And The third group focuses on nature-based solutions for water and wastewater management. So thank you for sharing those insights with us. Now I would like to move on to panel discussion. And we'll start. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Ms. Katrina Berunica. Ms. Katrina is Industrial Development Officer with the Energy Systems and Infrastructure Division of the Department of Energy at UNIDO. In her current role, she manages UNIDO's sustainable cities and low carbon transport projects in Asia and Pacific. Her areas of expertise include integrated urban planning, mainstreaming resilience across all dimensions of development, and emerging energy technologies. Welcome, Katrina. We are looking forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Ram, for this introduction. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yes, I hope you can see my screen. Very good.
Yes, Katrina.
Great. Well, thank you, and good day to everyone present. I think what I will try to achieve with my presentation is to talk about concrete action or technology assistance that we are currently implementing in India as a way to actually implement some of the key messages that we just heard from both Jaya and Parul in their opening statements. So I will start a little bit with setting up the context, but then I will go into the key activities that are being implemented as part of the technical assistance that is currently ongoing. So I think we already heard some of the key numbers, and we do all know that already more than 50% of world population lives in urban areas and cities, and this is a growing trend that we can see increasing over next years. I think we already heard a little bit, but I want to highlight here that cities indeed have a dual role to play. The first one I would say is they are economic growth engines, but at the same time they impact the environment. The second role that they play is they do provide innovative solutions to tackle most important environmental issues. So therefore, I would say that both the problem and solution lie within the same context that we need to deal with, and we will be discussing today. So can we afford to continue the same trend that until now we have seen that it has been mostly negative, considering the increased climate change impact that are happening in the context of cities? So of course, it's clearly no, we cannot afford, and I think we heard a little bit about transformative change and opportunities for big changes, and we heard about the cities, about Colombia and as well in India. Two cities have been highlighted as champions that have managed to change over last years. So I think this is an example that we are all trying to follow to kind of stop this negative trend that most of the areas have been exposed recently. So the trend that I'm talking about here, that I would want to highlight here and that we are trying to stop, is unregulated expansion and growth of urban areas that are leading to severe environmental, social, and economic challenges. Then we see current infrastructure and services delivery are not that efficient anymore, and they're not able to cope with the rising demand. Then furthermore, we see increased unemployment rates, which are creating a social divide between high and lower income society. Then the fourth one that I'm trying to highlight here is the strain on education and health infrastructure. When we talk about health infrastructure in particular, we have all witnessed how this has been now tested during the global COVID pandemic. So I think there is a big strain on that particular infrastructure within the context of cities. That is something that we need to deal with and make sure that in future this growing demand will be able to sustain. Then, of course, we heard also in the poll, the vehicles, increased vehicles in the transportation network that are leading to air pollution and poor health are becoming a major problem in the context of cities. So it is something that needs to be dealt with when we talk about infrastructure planning and service delivery. And then finally, another trend that we are seeing that we need to deal with and address in future is increased waste and wastewater generation and inadequate infrastructure and technology to actually treat that waste. And this particular challenge is something that we are also trying to address with our technical assistance that I will go into details a bit later on. Again, let's not only talk about the challenges, let's look at the opportunities. So cities are also providing a ground, for opportunities to leverage, as all the sustainability issues are interconnected with each other, and therefore there is a need for integrated and holistic approach when we are addressing these issues. Cities do provide opportunities when it comes to present planning, investment, and technology implementations. We heard that in India, major infrastructure investments are yet to be done. So therefore, there is an opportunity to do this now properly. Then furthermore, what I'm trying to highlight, another opportunity is that building institutional capacity and applying integrated approach will help us achieve urban sustainability, and that integrated infrastructure development plan should be through bottom-up and not top-down approach, which is something that we are also trying to achieve through our technical assistance. Finally, if managed well, I think compact, resilient, inclusive, and resource-efficient cities can become drivers of sustainable development and economic growth. So with that, I will go now into the technical assistance that is currently ongoing. UNIDO is implementing the Sustainable Cities Integrated Approach pilot jointly in partnership with MOHUA Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, as well as UN Habitat and National Institute for Urban Affairs. This is a partnership approach that we are undertaking to implement this project, which is being funded by Global Environment Facility. So 5 years ago, a Global Environmental Facility has started Sustainable Cities Integrated Approach program that includes 13 countries. India is one of the countries that were selected to join the program, and the total GEF financing that was provided for the program is a little bit more than 150 million. Here we are talking about actually grant funds, so not a loan or any in-kind of contribution. The co-financing that is being raised through the program is a bit more than 2.4 billion. So on the screen, you see countries that are included in the program, which are the pilot countries implementing the first set of activities that will be then showcased and will be learned on as the GEF continues running this global program. So when we zoom into what we are doing in India, there are 5 cities that were selected to benefit from the technical assistance. So it's Jaipur, Bhopal, Vijayawada, Guntur, and Mysore. Focus area for intervention is climate change mitigation, as well as the greenhouse gases emission reduction. Implementing agency is UNIDO, with, of course, inputs from UN Habitat and overall coordination from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. A project is being executed also directly by municipal corporations. So this is the way where we are trying to actually provide the funding directly to the cities based on their priorities for implementation of activities as required. The GEF funding that is provided is a little bit more than 12 million, and the main goal is to achieve 5.7 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents mitigated. The way this mitigation would be done is actually by implementing 3 interrelated components. The first one is about sustainable urban planning and management, which is done in partnership with UN Habitat. Second one is investment and technology demonstration project, where we are really implementing the technology transfer within the selected priority sector. In this case, most cities have selected waste management as their priority, and therefore the projects that are being executed are within that area. The third component is about partnership and knowledge management, where NIWA is the main partner for training and capacity building, in particular on priority sectors which have been identified, including solid waste, liquid waste, and water management. I have already talked a little bit about the 3 components. So the first component is talking about sustainable urban planning and management. What has been actually achieved through this component is a creation of urban sustainability framework for spatial planning in India. Based on this framework, UN Habitat has created city profiles and diagnostics that have examined the cities across key indicators and will finally inform sustainable city strategy leading to low carbon and low emission spatial planning with suggested key actions and interventions. So I think here we really have a demonstration of a data-driven approach where 12 sectors have been covered with over 141 indicators, and based on this data, the city profiles have been created, the diagnostics have been created, and will finally lead to sustainable city strategies for each of the 5 cities in the project. When it comes to investment and technology demonstration projects, I think here we have 2 objectives. Of course, to provide technical advisory services on how to develop, execute, and operate these projects. Most of these projects are being done in the PPP model. So I think there are bits and pieces that can be improved in the execution of PPPs. And the aim is here to, of course, create a project setup that will, on the long term, have both environmental positive impact as well as the economic feasibility. The second objective is, of course, to improve city services, environment amenity, including assistance for mobilizing funding and potential partial financing. So I have indicated that the GEF is providing the grant funding, which is approximately around 1.4 million per city, and that small amount is being there to leverage funding also from private and public sector to the financing which is required to implement projects that are quite I would say with a highly cost. So in Mysore, the project that is being executed is waste to compost facilities. Jaipur and Vijayawada have indicated sewage treatment plants as their priorities. So these are the projects that are being currently executed. Bhopal has indicated biomethanation project based on municipal organic waste as their priority, also currently under execution. And Guntur has selected a very interesting project that combines, I would say, 3 different technologies. So what they are looking at is electric 3-wheelers for waste collection within the city limits and solar PV installation for charging solution. So it is a combination of electric mobility to address the waste collection sector within the city, and then solar as a kind of green energy source for charging of these electric vehicles. Finally, the outcome of this action would be low emission and environmentally sound technologies, which will contribute to the city greenhouse gas emission reduction following the project target. Partnership and knowledge management platform, and I do see that we have a colleague from NIWA here present, so I'm sure she will go more into details. of their actions here. But what has been done until now is training and assistance needs analysis for these 5 cities. 3 main sectors have been indicated as the priority, so water, wastewater, and solid waste management. They have also done this training needs and assessment, I think, across 3 stakeholders group. And finally, they have come up with the 5 training models for each city based on this assessment. So again, I think here we have an approach that is based on the data that has been collected as part of the TANA. In addition, under this platform, what we have done is actually provided support to MOHUA to unite all of their IT platforms in a single platform that will be technically created on different applications. That platform is now accessible to all the cities. It is user-friendly way to access the data. It allows real-time monitoring of various achievements and across the Swachh Bharat mission, actually, as well as it provides data on greenhouse gas emission from waste processing, which is calculated both at the city and a state level. So what is the key value addition that we are aiming to achieve with this technical assistant? So first of all, this technical assistant is very much aligned with national missions, in particular Swachh Bharat mission of MOHUA. It contributes to India's goal of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It demonstrates the shift from fragmented to integrated approach through collaboration and coordination across various sectors. Then it promotes participatory approach to include all stakeholders. I did highlight it, for instance, NIUA reached out to 3 different groups of stakeholders during their TANA process. It demonstrates the urban sustainability assessment framework and relevant indicators to the cities. So it is based on evidence planning, and it is enabling cities to track and monitor their relevant indicators and to achieve SDGs. I will highlight a few more key values that we are trying to achieve. So we are showcasing how to adopt sustainable and resilient options when it comes to demonstrating low carbon technologies that lead to greenhouse gas emission reduction. We are promoting PPP based business model where participation from private sector is being sought. Of course, we have to highlight this is not something new, but based on the context of these projects, it has been identified as the most appropriate way to operate the projects. Then we are looking to capacitate various city staff on planning, operation, maintenance. ULBs are also being capacitated through both investment projects on one side, but as well as development of city strategies on the other side. Furthermore, there is a technical assistance being provided, particularly on municipal climate smart capital investment plan. We did hear the challenge in India cities is limited operating budget, but still there is, therefore there is an importance on how to actually prioritize the investments that are being done in cities based on this financial availability that the cities have. And then finally, the final key value addition that I'm trying to highlight is that all the information thus far have been data-driven. All the things that have been done when it comes to urban planning, when it comes to investment project or capacity, has been done based on the data received through various channels and activities. So the importance of data-driven informed decision have been key throughout the project. Some of the lessons learned already until now, we did have a midterm evaluation conducted at the beginning of this year, where independent evaluators kind of went through the project, seen what we have did so far and what are the key lessons. So I think the first key lesson is a strong culture collaboration is required to understand the interrelated sustainability issues. The second key lesson, starting point for establishing climate resilience requires city to understand its exposure to potential climate impacts, and therefore to develop responsive policies to address these vulnerabilities. Third lesson, infrastructure project with short-term planning in inadequate financing just cannot work. This is the issue that needs to be addressed on the longer term, where different financing sources need to be taken into account, as well as best available technology option, as well as how does that fit to the overall city urban development strategy. Fourth lesson, demonstrating the technical feasibility and commercial viability of projects will set an example for other cities to replicate these kind of models. PPP would be the fifth lesson. It is not something new, but its implementation has a challenge. So I think there are a lot of lessons here that we have learned, such as addressing the appropriated financing scheme that are required to maintain the operational sustainability of these projects. So again, longer term planning is required. Then the sixth lesson, it is essential for cities to gain understanding on insights and current needs and future needs. So therefore, data plays key here when it comes to urban planning perspective and allocating resources for different projects. And then finally, there is a strong need for training and capacity building of cities leaders to develop and execute citywide low carbon projects. When it comes to long-term sustainability, of course, we do not want to have with the project activities ended that they kind of go to waste or some of the planning instruments are put aside, but we are talking about long-term sustainability, and the way this is being addressed through the project is creating local and national level buy-in for endorsement and long-term ownership and sustainability. Here, the participating cities and MUHUA have a crucial role to play to ensure that whatever has been done through the project, such as establishing of IT platforms, such as the planning mechanisms, the capacity building that was done, will be shared with other cities. There will be lessons learned, as well as, for instance, the investment projects that have been executed through the project lifetime. Afterwards, they will be operated based on a sustainable business model for the longer term impact. So I see Ram is already here, so I think my time is up. So I will thank you, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that might come up during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. I think that was a wonderful presentation, and thank you so much for sharing your insights from an international context as well as from the CAP project in terms of the projects and various interventions which have been going on. It's so good to see that you note the emerging opportunities in urbanizations, not just the challenges, but the way we see that how cities could capitalize these opportunities and what kind of approach could be there and how integrated planning plays an important role. And thanks for sharing those findings from the midterm review, which gives us important insights on how Indian cities should be looking at it. I'm hopeful that the cities that we have here and the people who will be looking at this presentation will take advantage of this knowledge and this experience that we have it in CAP context and advance their understanding while doing integrated urban planning and tap some of these opportunities going forward. So thank you so much, Katrina. We'll come back to you for more questions. I'll request our audience to keep posting your questions, any queries, comments, suggestions in the chat box. We will take up that with our panelists as we go along. Now, moving on to our next part of discussion today, I would like to request our team to put up the next poll. So the next poll that we have is, do you think integrated urban planning is crucial for climate smart development? So the options are strongly agree, agree, can't say, disagree, or strongly disagree. Do you think integrated urban planning is crucial for climate smart development? Okay, so we have received a good response. In fact, uh, most of the people who are in the audience today, they feel that 87% of them strongly agree that integrated urban planning is crucial for climate smart development, and rest 13% say that they agree with the proposition. So we have a broad consensus that integrated urban planning is one of the key areas of intervention if we want to do a climate smart development in our cities. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now I would like to proceed to our second panelists. Uh, Ms. Paramita Datta De. Paramita is a program lead at National Institute of Urban Affairs India. She's an urban planner with over 20 years of experience. Currently, she leads the capacity building program for Swachh Bharat Mission Urban and Sustainable Cities Integrated Approach Pilot project. She has worked on the South Asia urban knowledge in 4 countries: India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Welcome, Paramita. We request you to take the stage.
Thank you, Ram. So without much ado, I'll just quickly share my screen. So as Katrina just mentioned that at NIUA, we have been part of the SCIAP project, and we have been looking at the capacity building part of the SCIAP project. Just to give you a little bit of context, as Katrina mentioned earlier, there are 5 cities, Bhopal, Guntur, Jaipur, Mysuru, and Vijayawada, that are part of this project in India. And NIUA was tasked on the key activities of capacity building for 5 of these cities, and then handholding them and then scaling it up. So right now we are at the stage where we have already prepared a training and assistance need analysis for each of these cities. Then we are preparing the curriculum and the module, which is almost done. We are going to further embark on training delivery in these 5 cities, followed by handholding and scale up. So what did we do in the training and needs assessment? When we started doing secondary research, we discovered there was not much material which was updated around the understanding of these 5 cities. So we looked at the legislative and institutional framework, the organization structure, and the understanding of water sanitation, solid waste management in these cities. We then decided to do a customized sector-wise stakeholder collection of views of the stakeholders in these areas. Since when we started the project, the pandemic situation, an unexpected pandemic situation crept in. So we had to quickly alter our mode of doing of our work, and we switched on to online interaction, where we carried out semi-structured interviews and focus group discussions. And then we collected the data and then further went on preparing the modules. So these are the 5 training TANA training and assistance need analysis report that we have come out with, 1 per city. So what we did was that we prepared questionnaires stakeholder wise as well as sector wise. So if it's like solid waste management, we spoke to senior and mid-level officials in the ULBs, that is in the municipal corporations. By senior and mid-level, I mean the commissioners, the senior engineers, the chief engineers, the executive engineers, and the like. And then the mid-level was mostly the new entrants in the corporation. And we also spoke to the frontline workers. Normally, whenever we are preparing capacity building modules, this is the group that gets left out. But they are a very important last mile connectivity in these sectors. So we had a focus group discussions with these people, and it was very exciting to see the results. The challenges we faced was that, this kind of thing was not done before. So the data availability, if you have to compare from then and now, was a little challenging. Then because of the pandemic situation, it was very difficult to get the city officials. So we were available anytime, right from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening. We conducted interviews, and they did share a lot of insights which helped us frame the curriculum. We discovered that they are not very comfortable with online training, and they are more comfortable with face-to-face training. And they are also more comfortable if it's in their vernacular language. So in fact, the team, the larger SCIP team, they have officials in each of these 5 cities who know the vernacular, from the UNIDO team as well as the UN Habitat team. And they have been extremely helpful in getting us to conduct these FTGs and the interviews. So that's how we customized ourselves, and we went forward. So we came up with 3 modules: one for solid waste management, one for wastewater and septage management, and one for urban water management. When we conducted the training needs analysis, we discovered that there were a lot of areas that were common in all the sectors and across the stakeholders. So we decided to have these modules like a comprehensive module for senior as well as mid-level functionaries of all the 5 cities. But when we do the training program, some cities are more interested in some areas, and some are interested in lesser areas. So for example, when we were talking to people from Guntur and Vijayawada, they were very keen on application of geospatial tools in waste management. So although we were not mandated to create this module, but since there was a need, we decided to create a separate module. And in fact, we did try to do this online, and the learning was that, they want more hands-on, but because of the situation of the pandemic, we had to do it online. So if the situation improves, we'll also have a hands-on training on this. And the other input that came from our partners as well as from the city stakeholders is that when they are deciding, say, a particular technology, so if it's, say, solid waste management, so we also ask them across the value chain, what is the kind of training need that they have. So say, for example, when they're deciding a technology, it's very important to know which is the technology that has least impact on the climate, but it may be costly. So how do you decide? So we have come up with something like a Excel sheet through which they can calculate the GHG emission, and they can sort of combine. For example, in wastewater, many cities have a certain technology. They have MBBR or ASB technology. Then how do you combine these technologies and come up with something that is more suited to the climate? And in case of water management, we have come out with what adaptation strategies. So this 5th module is also an addition, which came out as an outcome of the TANA. And during delivery, we have learned that they are more comfortable with vernacular. People are more interested in peer-to-peer learning. So this has also been our experience in the Swachh Bharat Mission workshops that we are doing. We have done, and probably in SBM 2.0, we'll also get an opportunity to do. So peer-to-peer learning is very important. So we have where people would like to go to the field and see what has worked, what has not worked, and why. And also if it is offline, and if they are more of a captive audience, and they are also away from their usual firefighting that they are doing in the city. So it is easier to get their attention, and when they go back, they can discuss with their peers in their respective cities, and actually it will help in implementation. Now, the third set of module that we are now preparing is for the frontline workers. So when we were talking to the frontline workers, we realized that many of them, and particularly a whole lot of them, are women, and they have never received any training on how to improve their self-esteem, how to be a better leader, how to talk to people. So we are designing a module on leadership and motivation. Another area that we found where they need a lot of capacity building is around accessing social security schemes. Like the NSKF is an institute that is working on convergence, that is on greener jobs. And also, if suppose there is a Safai Mitra or a frontline worker whose children need not be in that profession and they want to get into another profession. So there are schemes for education of children of frontline workers or Safai Mitras. There are many other schemes where due to their income, they can get some kind of a rebate and their children can get into better schools and colleges. So a lot of times they don't know about these schemes. And even if they know, they don't know how to access these schemes. What are the documents they need? So we are also preparing a ready reckoner on the social security schemes, and we will be providing training to them. And this training will be in vernacular. And we are also preparing training of trainers, because NIUA, as you all are probably aware, we are a national institute. And for us to go and actually do trainings in each of these cities in the vernacular is not, it's not so easy. So we are planning to partner with regional agencies that know the vernacular, that know the situation there, and then do the delivery there. So we are going to prepare some training or training of trainer modules on this. And the third module that we are preparing for frontline workers is around personal protective gear. There is a lot of personal protective gear, but a lot of times they're not comfortable using it. So, and how to use it, which are the best ones, how to dispose it of during the pandemic situation. So around these things are the other modules that we are preparing for the frontline workers. Now, how does the work that we are doing in the SCIP project fit into the overall framework of climate resilience? So at NIUA, we have a team that is called CQ. They are working on climate smart cities assessment framework. And this framework has been designed along with MoHUA, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and NIUA is the anchor agency. So there are a set of indicators around 6 areas: urban planning, green cover, biodiversity, energy and green building, mobility and air quality, water management, and waste management. Now, for each of these indicators, cities are assessing. So the smart cities, which are about the cities that have been onboarded so far, about 126 cities, they have assessed themselves against this framework. And for this, we are also providing training modules in each of the areas. And the one in purple that you can see in the left-hand corner is around waste management and water, and the one in blue that you can see is around water management. So these modules that are being prepared, we are working with our CQ team so that whatever we do under SCIP project, it also gets dovetailed into the national conversation, and there is enough convergence around resilience. So the one on landfill remediation, scientific landfill management, and plastic waste management is where we are giving inputs to the CQ team. So that's about what we have been doing as part of the SCIP project. If time permits, I can also share our learnings under capacity building in the Swachh Bharat mission. So Ram, would I have time, or maybe you could give me time towards the end? You can let me know.
Yeah, Paramita, you can maybe continue and share a few things about SBM Urban as well. I think it will be relevant for our audience.
Sure. Okay, just give me a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have been working with the Swachh Bharat Mission's capacity building efforts since 2016, and the capacity building efforts that we have been doing are aligned also to the SDGs. So this table gives you a snapshot of what fits in which SDG. So if it's about policy, regulation, mainstreaming of waste speakers, skill development, health insurance, and others, that fits into SDG 1, 5, 8, and 3. Whether when we talked about SWM, facilities, focusing on decentralized facilities, zero landfill models, that fits around SDG 6, 11, and 13. Then we spoke. We also did a lot of capacity building around innovation in solid waste management, convergence, which fits into SDG 7, 9, and 10. We conducted workshops in 58 locations. We did 154 workshops and were able to impart our work training to more than 3,000 more than 6,000 participants across more than 3,200 urban local bodies. And we completed it just before the pandemic set in. So our learning, whatever I'm going to share, is based on pre-pandemic situation. And this map shows all the urban local bodies that participated in our workshops, the participants, where they came from. That covers the entire country. So our workshops were structured into 3 days. The first day was more about rules, regulations, technologies. The second day was about field visit. And the third day was based on what people learned in the classroom and what they saw on field. They were asked to come out with a solid waste management plan of a city. This was a group activity. This also gave us insights into how successful we were in imparting our training to the participants. So some of the key features of our workshop was that we, because of the on-ground exposure, people really felt very related. They could relate to what is happening in the city they went to and what is happening in their own city. And we also tried to make sure that all the site visits that we took people to, they covered the entire value chain of waste management, right from collection, transportation, processing, disposal, innovative approaches, upscaling activities, recycling activities, etc. Towards the last 2 phases, we were told by MoHUA that we must focus on the smaller cities because a lot of resource actually goes into capacity building of the bigger cities, the mega cities and the metro cities. But there is less effort that is focused on training for cities which are mid-size with population from 20,000 to 5 lakhs. So we focused more for these cities. In the last phase, that is phase 4, we also did a pilot and did a capacity building workshop with elected representatives. So with ULBs, it's a very different way of interacting. The pedagogy is very different. For elected representatives, 3 days was a little too much for them. And we had initially identified, 2 people, 2 participants per ULB, but we realized that elected representatives, they prefer to come in a group and that's how they feel comfortable. And also when we said 2 persons per ULB, it was mostly men who came, except for the southern cities and particularly Kerala, where we had a huge representation of women representatives. So these are some of the learnings that if you have to make it more gender sensitive, we realized that we should invite more people per ULB, or maybe we could go to that particular ULB and have a workshop, but then that becomes a little bit of hindrance when you want to do the field visits. We also practice what we preach. So when all our events were green, right from not allowing anybody to use a plastic bottle, using a steel bottle. We actually distributed steel bottles when they were going for the field visit. We made sure all the mementos, everything was, made of biodegradable material and green and such forth. A lot of times, as I told you, our experience on preparing modules for ground functionaries, even for mid-level officials or whether it is elected representatives, convergence of programs for waste management with regard to green jobs and skill training is very important. So we also focused on that. We know what we did is that we clustered our workshops to make sure that people who attend a particular workshop are from that region. So for example, if we had a workshop in Bhubaneswar, it was mostly the people from Andhra or surrounding states that came. So they wasted less travel transporting, and also they were able to relate to the situations, whether it is geoclimatic relations, geoclimatic conditions or cultural values and conditions and practices. Because of the very interactive model of our workshops, it was very appreciated, and I'll later on show you some of the impact stories. That was very exciting for us as a capacity building group. And lastly, the trainers who trained during these workshops, across these 58 cities where we took people to show good practices, we made sure that these trainers were not only academic, not just people who were from academic background, but we had government officials who have done well in their cities. We had experts, we had consultants, and we even had some good people's persons. Like, for example, the chairperson of Lonavala, she's done excellent work on IEC in Lonavala. And the mayor of Ujjain wanted to know what Lonavala has done. So we invited her to meet the person, the elected representative in Lonavala at the workshop, and she was very happy to have attended that. So this kind of cross-learning and peer-to-peer learning has been one of the key successes of our program. We also try to see how well people perceived what they learned and what they saw, and make it more interesting. So we had individual quizzes, and we had group activities, and we distributed certificates and mementos. So people really liked that. We have crystallized all the site visit activities and all the good practices into compendiums in the different years, which is all available in the NIUA website. And these are some of the impact stories of people who attended the workshops. They went back to their cities and they implemented good practices in their cities. This is about Kerala. I'll just quickly run through these pictures. This is Telangana, composting site in Telangana. This is Punjab, where they actually improved their state level program, because we are fortunate to have the CEO of PMIDC and the director SBM Urban attend our program, and he had a lot of takeaways from our workshop, and he actually went and did a lot of things in Punjab, right from improving their bylaws to improving the user fee collection, mainstreaming of informal waste collectors, setting up better decentralized composting facilities, improving plastic waste management. We had very senior people attending our Uttarakhand workshops. They were also very happy with it. These are some of the pictures of what they did in Uttarakhand. So the key takeaways from SBM 1.0 to as we get into SBM 2.0, we feel it is very important to have something called a mentor-mentee model, which many of you might know of. And this is something which we felt might be more successful as we go forward. Cross-learning, we can keep continuing the way we did in SBM 1.0. Elected representative workshop, surely it has to be upscale, and pilot was just to see that. And it was very exciting to know that more and more elected representatives would like to get to come to our workshops. And then linking waste management with job creation and circular economy is something we think can be taken as we move forward. And particularly the GHG with regard to GHG emission. So if I implement a particular technology, what is the reduction in GHG emission I can achieve? This is something even elected representatives want to know. And if we do something like annual Swatch event, I mean, a lot of it is being done, but we have proposed this to the ministry, and let's see, even an SBM fellowship or a thesis combination competition. These are some of the key ideas we have. Creation of a National Waste Management Alliance, and for finally, the learning platform that is being already done by Mahua, as Katrina mentioned. So these are some of the key takeaways from my experience in capacity building in two programs, SCIP and SBM. Thank you for listening to me patiently, and look forward to your questions and clarifications. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you, Paramita. Thanks for such a beautiful presentation and sharing your insights with us regarding the capacity building work which you have been doing, both as part of CIAP as well as under the Swachh Bharat mission. I think those are fantastic insights in terms of what is working and what is not working. And some of the strategies which you have used for capacity building are really good and practical and aligned with what user actually needs, rather than being a top down but more like a bottom up, trying to regional put a regional context to it, trying to give them a practical learning. So those are really good insights, and I hope when we are going into SBM 2.0, some of these insights actually help us do a more robust capacity building and training as we move forward. And definitely ideas like student thesis or competitions or fellowships would be the new flavor which will get added to the traditional capacity building domain. So we are looking forward to such new initiatives from you and NIUA. And thank you for sharing these experiences with the community. So now I would like to move to the next section of our discussion today. Before we reach out to our third panelist, we have a poll coming in. This is an interesting one, maybe putting an urban planning hat on. So do you think urban resilience should be a mandatory component of urban planning and policy making? We do have environmental sustainability and other aspects built into master planning exercise. But urban resilience in a holistic perspective, do you feel that this should be a area of significant concerns when we are doing master planning? So I would request our audience to please take up the poll. Let us know what do they feel about it, and we can get an idea what kind of perspectives come from the community. So we have the results out. I think almost 3/4 of the audience strongly agrees with the proposition that urban resilience should be mandatory component in urban planning and policy making. And rest 25%, 27% also say that they agree. So we have a large consensus that urban resilience should be considered as a component, mandatory component, while we are doing urban planning and policy making. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. Now I would like to introduce our third panelist, Shri Chandrapratap Gohil. Mr. Gohil is Additional Commissioner with Bhopal Municipal Corporation. He is an officer from Madhya Pradesh State Administrative Services 2012 batch. Earlier, he has served as Sub-Divisional Magistrate in 4 districts, and he was the director of CM Helpline, a public grievance redressal cell. At present, he spearheads PMAY Urban Mission at Bhopal Municipal Corporation. Welcome, Mr. Gohil. We request you to please take the stage and enlighten us with your presentation.
Thank you for the introduction. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers to give me the opportunity for presenting this. As we all know that in any political administrative setup, decision making is very important part, and that decision making, you all know that it's been done over various parameters. For example, in a political setup in which any municipal corporation works in India, it is very important to use the meager resources in optimum way. And I think that's this Sustainable Cities Integrated Approach Pilot Program, that is SCIAP, has given us the ample opportunity, and its fruits are being now shown. Please next. Bhopal has been associated with this program from the engagement was started from the September 2019, in which we have provided all relevant data points which can be given and which were relevant regarding the study. Only 69% data can be given, is being given regarding the SCIAP, because we all know that there are jungle of agencies and jungle of departments have been working for different things and for different mandates. So overall, what can be given is been given, and out of which we'll see in the next slides that the data point that has been given has given us the opportunity to draw the conclusion that what is good and what is bad, and what strategies we have to work. Next. This we can see the indicative slide that we are doing the city profile and diagnosis based on various parameters, and over which out of which the decision making can be steered in such a way that it gives some ample kind of parameters which helps in us in decision making. Next, please. These are the 12 parameters over which the USAF framework works. We can see that there are 131 total indicators. The 54 is primary, 55 is secondary, and 22 are tertiary. All these parameters are related to housing and property, water, sanitation. All these subjects belongs to majorly of municipal corporation, like solid waste management, transportation. We all have some pilot kind of programs and the flagship schemes run by various state governments and central government over this, like clean energy. We are shifting towards solar energy. We are shifting towards CNGs. Then there is disaster risk management, governance and data management, finance and economy, and urban farm and public space. Please next. So as I already told that there are 69% of the indicators being collected from the Bhopal Municipal Corporation and various departments. We all know that the data is not in that form, is not maintained in that form in the government setup. And in the government setup, it is always a challenging task to rope all the authorities, but we have tried to coordinate as much as possible so that more and more data can be given, relevant data can be given. This is the indicative list. 69% of data has been collected. You can see a very interesting table in which various parameters are being given. For example, percentage of household with piped connection. So city performance is 5, which is very excellent. And in the score of 6, 5 numbers are given. And 94% of population is being given with the piped connection. We came to know but in the lower part, you can see that the extent of metering of water supply connections is only 5%. And this is always the pain point, and it has been indicated by this USAF framework that the metering of water is not done, and which is resulting into the suboptimal use of water, as well as the finances and the revenue generation is also being hampered, which is very important thing to be taken care of. Please next. Next. When all the 12 parameters have been seen of the USAF framework, we can easily find that on the 3 parameters, our work is satisfactory and up to the mark. But the pain areas are also been specifically given, like housing and clean energy, environment, urban farm, and transportation and social forms. In the housing, as I will say, I will explain in the next slides that there is a vulnerable population living in vulnerable areas, which are used to in the flooding or in slope So these kind of things that we have come out. And the boxes, you can see that the data, how much data we have given. For the example, water supply, we have given all the data that we had. And for the sanitation, we have 89% of data that we had. So overall, this Bhopal city score is 3, which is kind of medium kind of score. And now we clearly know that on which points we have to work better to increase the sustainability of the city. Next, please. So these are the issues emerged. There is the urban sprawl. As my earlier panelist also told us, that there is the urban sprawl that has been hampering the cities, and it has been the cities are expanding horizontally, and very low density type of development has been done, which is again resulting in the pollution, which is again resulting in the more resources and more service kind of thing has been made. The second one is the endangered natural resources. We all know that there is a wetland site in Bhopal, and there is a big upper lake, it's called. The periphery of big upper lake has been traditionally been habitated by the dwelling units, and in the upcoming master plan, we have taken care of that so that the upcoming development can be controlled. And the third point is the vulnerability in the informal settlements. There is a huge, what we say, slum areas are being located in Bhopal, which are located in, for example, in a slopey area, in a flooding area. So all these are vulnerable settlements. The fourth point is the high dependence on the fossil fuel and suboptimal use of NMT. Then it is again being related to the urban sprawl. We are expanding horizontally. So it again requires very high motorization and absence of the non-motorized transport. We are highly dependent upon the fossil fuels, which is again increasing the pollution and the quality of air, and ultimately the sustainability of the city has been hampered. So transportation sector is underperforming in this city. It is very clear. It has been given. Please next. Next. Yes. We can see that increase in privately owned vehicles, it is a feature of Bhopal, and I believe it is a feature of most of the cities in India. Good public increase in privately owned vehicles is directly related to the absence of the private absence or the not better type of public transport. We have a Bhopal metro phase. We are launching. We have launched the Bhopal metro phase, whose construction work is going on. That will be completed by 2023, most probably. So, but some initiatives have been done. We have BRTS corridor, but then again we have failed to push up in a zealous way. But we are trying. And after the launch of metro and the main points of BRT has been covered, this problem can be solved out. We have also started the public sharing cycling of the chartered cycles, which have also been a good response. But then again, the roads are also to be have such kind of provision to use these bicycles. Next. Next. We can see that 72% of population has access to the public transportation at 500 walking distances. You can see that there's a 24-kilometer BRTS corridor. We have a dedicated BRTS corridor, and it has been functional. And we have also procured around 100 buses. We are in the process to procure those buses, and that would again will augment the public transport. We have also 90 docking stations with 500 GPS tagged cycles, but this is a kind of start we have given, and we are trying to improve it also. You can see that the existing bus stops are in the maroon points, and existing NMT docking are in the black points. You can see that some lopsidedness is always there, and that has to be catered off, and it can be easily seen by this geospatial study. Next. Now, when we are procuring, as I have told, 150 buses, and again 150 buses more. There is total 300 buses will be procured. and we are using on the clean fuel vehicle type of things. And when we, this is the multimodal development that we are going to have in the Bhopal in the next upcoming years. You can see the metro stations in the orange dot. It has been scattered all through the city, and after the launch of metro, we are very hopeful that this problem of urban mobility will be taken care of. There is huge, Bhopal is a city where there are offices are located at one point of location in the mid section of the area, and people commute from various from up to 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers, but what we can see easily from our common perspective. So metro will again will be very helpful in solving this problem. Next. Yeah, next. So this is the mutually reinforcing benefits of the investment as various programs like SBM or Smart City, Amrit and Awas Yojana. After integrating all these things, we can see that the percentage of population is 72%, which is 500 meters from the public transport stops. And kilometer of road with public transit per lakh kilometer per lakh population is 13.88 kilometers. But when we integrate it with the metro, please the next slide. But when we integrate it with the metro, the earlier 72% of city value goes on to increasing of 82% of the city value. That is up to the benchmark we are going through. So after integrating with the metro, the city value of 82% will be achieved. That is the percent of population within 500 meters. But yes, the road density of road is always a pain point per 1 lakh population. It is low. We are also working over that. Road is a critical issue in Bhopal, and we are also working over that. Next. So one of the parameters of the USAF is the green spaces, and Bhopal is known as the city of lakes, and it has a lot of greenery. But you can see that only 25% of population is within the 500 meters of public park or the open space, whereas the benchmark is 80%. You can see that open spaces per capita square meter per person is 11.6. The value is 11.6, which is up to the mark. But when we see the next slide, please next. When we see the next slide, when we integrate it with the Amrit projects and in which we are increasing the green areas. So this 25% value is again increased to 37% of, that is the percentage of population within 500 meters will be 37%. It is also away from the benchmark, but yes, we are in the right direction. And by this study, we are now confident that we have got the pain points. So now we will work over that and we will betterly use that resources, our meager resources. Next. So this is one of the things that I have told, that the slum areas are located in the vulnerable areas. There are 90 slum locations in which around 36% of households of Bhopal resides. Bhopal is a place which is situated in the hilly type of. Am I audible? This hilly kind of region is located in the hilly kind of region. So slums are located in the vulnerable areas that has to be cared of. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which I am heading here, is we are using it. We are already in the process of making around 3,000 total dwelling units. So it will cater the problem. Next. So these are the workshops and consultations which we are doing, and on a day-to-day basis and in week-to-weekly basis, we are in the contact with the team, and all the data points are also been shared by us. Next. What I want to say is that we are also preparing the VLR program, and we are also onboarded our team for the next program, and we are looking forwardly for the continuous support that has been given to the Bhopal Municipal Corporation. We will also support and will get the best of thing out of it. Next. So these are the local area plans and zonal plans. We are also in the process of making local area plans and zonal plans. There's as I told that in order to control the development, proper planning is required, which is we are also in the process of making the master plan of 2031. So all these things when will converge will give it very, I believe and I hope, it will lead to the sustainability of the city. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gohil, for sharing your experiences from Bhopal, and I must congratulate you for the good work which is going on, especially in water sector and sanitation sector, where you have been able to do quite well. In fact, it's very interesting to see that the USAF framework, which has been prepared and which has this set of indicators across different baskets, it has been able to help Bhopal City Corporation to understand which are the areas where efforts need to be made, or which are the areas where good initiatives are going on. And we see a very good application of data-based decision making, which is happening in case of Bhopal as of now. I think the challenges which you have highlighted are very common in Indian context, and many cities in India can relate to the challenges which are faced by Bhopal, and the success stories of application of this framework which you have demonstrated. I hope this experience will be useful for other cities as well, and they could apply this framework to do a data-driven integrated planning approach. So thank you very much, sir, for sharing these insights with us. Now I would like to move to the next part of our discussion. So I would request attendees to take up our last poll for the day. The poll is which sector should be prioritized for climate action in cities? Having seen the presentations from WRI, NIUA, UNIDO, Bhopal, based on your experiences, based on your association with cities, which sector do you think can have the biggest impact on climate action in cities? So the options that we have here are energy, transport, buildings, waste management, and others. So we are looking forward to your votes so that we can understand that which sectors do you feel should be focused in cities, prioritized in cities for climate action. So we have the results out now. I think a majority of the audience feel that transportation sector, which is 2/3 of the audience, says that the transport is the sector where a lot of effort should be done, uh, which is followed by sectors like waste management and energy, where we have received 18% of the votes. So transport followed by energy and waste management are coming out to be priority areas for climate action in cities. Thank you for sharing your feedback with us. Now we would like to move to our last panel discussion, but a very interesting panelist that we have here, Mr. Herman Benan. Herman is the lead of the Urban Lab with UN Habitat's Planning, Finance, and Economic Development section, where he oversees a diverse range of projects and initiatives focused on innovation and sustainable development outcomes across the globe. Earlier, Herman was the Director of City Transformation and Spatial Planning at the city of Johannesburg, where he led the strategic spatial planning and capital investment planning for the city. Welcome, Herman. I would request you to please enlighten us with the global experiences on climate smart cities. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Just want to get the presentation going. You can see my screen?
Yes, Herman, you're good to go.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this very interesting discussion. I'm talking a bit more on a theoretical basis, I suppose, to look at which are the main tenets of strategic spatial planning that can help us in terms of moving forward. And I want to start with a quote that really comes from Alice in Wonderland, where Alice asked the cat, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. And I think in many ways, a lot of plans that one see at fairly high levels put us in a position where Alice is, where it doesn't really tell you exactly where to go. It doesn't tell mayors or city managers or senior officials what is it that they need to do to take that next step to sustainability. And I think in this presentation, I'm going to attempt to look at how can we transform cities better. I'm concentrating on the developing countries as an area where this could be applied, because I think the agenda for development is more of a transformative nature in developing countries. It's not meant to be a critique against master plans. I've seen some really good master plans as well, but I think in general, these master plans could be quite static. They in some ways are not as strategic as one would like it to be. And what we need is more of a planning approach that is more agile and can keep up with the urbanization trends as they go. So we need to look at what are those key building blocks of what is it that we need to provide for planning to be able to guide future development. And for that, the first question is really about, well, why do we need planning? What is the objective? And a lot of previous speakers indicated about decision making, and I'm glad that they did, because ultimately plans are there to influence decision making, and it's decision making at a high political level. It's within the administration. It's decision making by private sector developers and citizens. And we need to provide the basis for decision making, and it needs to be an informed basis with a better understanding of what the implications of those decisions are. The second point of what planning needs to do is it really needs to illustrate what the intent for the future is. It needs to be clear enough to provide the direction. It needs to be clear enough to indicate how will it move the different indicators that we've spoken about. We understand a more evidence-based approach, but very often plans are not clear on how will it change the environment that we live in. The third point is that it needs to drive and direct capital investment. And in most cases, plans are merely an input into the budgeting and investment process. And I think there needs to be a stronger case for plans to be front and center when it comes to capital investment. It's the same as building a house. You wouldn't build a house by saying to the electrician, the plumber, the bricklayer, yeah, go ahead, build the house. And there's a plan. You can use it as input if you want. And then you go ahead and build a house. You wouldn't do that. But somehow when we talk about cities, plans just become guidelines, and we leave it to the thousands of people that are actually busy building the city. So I'm advocating for a stronger role for plans, but then those plans need to have the characteristics to be able to do that as well. Then the planning process, I think, is sometimes underestimated as a key capacity builder. It's in those processes where we change people's minds, where we change the understanding of the city and how it works. And that in itself is a very important outcome of planning that shouldn't be underestimated. And then lastly, plans should become a tool for discussion and integration. We've heard from other speakers as well, the cross-sectoral integration and the importance of that, but also to keep a discussion going. So it can't be something static in its nature. And I really want to bring it back to this whole issue of transformative agenda. If we really want to change cities, if we want to meet the SDGs, then we need to transform cities. That's the big lever, is at a city and city region scale, where if we do the right kind of things and provide a very clear vision of what a city needs to look like in future, or an area needs to look like, and what the different projects are, like a public transit system, like a good pedestrian crossing, cycle lanes, higher density, a park. The clearer we make these things, the better chance it has of being implemented. And so in most of the developing countries, if we want to meet the SDGs, then cities need to transform. And it is about driving and giving direction to that transformation process that we need to make. Right. Then, so the key building blocks for the strategic planning. I'm going to just go through them very quickly, and then show a few examples of different cities where it's been applied, just to illustrate the point. But the first one is really understanding the city. And I think in a lot of plans that I've seen, there's a lot of information, and the information is almost overwhelming. And I think we're looking at a more dynamic understanding of the city in the way that the presenter from Bhopal has just explained, to say, well, how do we understand the city if we start to overlay certain parts of information, and to make sure that the decision makers get the right level of information to be able to take good decisions. The second is really about the strategic responses. Once we understand what the main issues are that needs to be attended to, once we understand what the opportunities are within particular cities for future development, then we can develop strategic responses. And there we can develop what the appropriate mode for development, of the model for development would be within that particular context. But it's also important that we test the recommendations to see what is the effect that it'll have on those indicators. From that process, one creates a spatial vision for the particular area that then starts to direct future growth. But it's also important in that to make sure that one clearly indicates the strategic areas for development and what it is that needs to happen within those. It needs to be followed up by actions, and most of the actions really look at, it may be at an institutional level, finance and economic level, spatial policy instruments, etc., and general urban management, of what is it that needs to be done to actually give effect to the plan. And then, of course, the all-important issue about investment. Unless we get the right kind of investment in the right places, one wouldn't see the transformation that we are seeking. So I'm going to start with some of the examples. This is Medina in Saudi Arabia that we've applied this methodology to, and you can see their master plan on the left-hand side here. Let me just get a pointer on. Is quite broad, and all these yellow areas are future areas for development. It's quite a strategy that looks at expanding the city, as well as expanding into these satellite cities as well. In our analysis, we indicated that it will take about 100 years on the current growth rate to fill up this yellow space here. And that expansion is wholly unsustainable, and especially if one is looking at establishing these satellite cities as well. The population density in that city is fairly low, except for this center portion, and really below sustainable levels for density. And then, of course, there's a lot of vacant land in the urban area, and then to just abutting to the area as well. And through the analysis, we came with 4 key areas from the diagnostic that needed to be addressed. This process, of course, is one that are only achieved through good participation exercises. It's really harnessing the local knowledge within these areas and then supplementing it with good analytical work so that it raised the understanding for everyone and all participants in government. Some of the strategic responses in this particular case were really to look at where one can increase the better movement within the city, and how can we harness that to build a more compact and more dense city around these areas. They planned a public transit system. We analyzed all the public transit lines to see which areas are walkable to the proposed station areas and what would the effect of that be. And we highlighted what the key or most important lines would be to implement. But that provided quite large areas for intensification and redevelopment. And if one then overlay that with a whole range of vacant land areas, with the green and blue network, one started to see where the opportunities are for creating urban centralities, some of them more residential, mixed use areas, some more commercial areas, and some more heritage and environmentally orientated areas as well. And that started to give rise, when you overlay all the different proposal layers, to an urban form that says, instead of expanding outward like the plan was before, is expand inward and rather make use of the vacant land opportunities and the other underdevelopment opportunities and build these new centralities around a public transit system. The important question, of course, is, so what does it mean? What will that do for the city? And I think it's important to then translate these proposals into saying, well, currently the sustainable densities are these darker areas in the center of the city. The rest is very low density and unsustainable. And in future, if one develop according to the plan, this would be the case here. It would increase from about 6% of the population being in more sustainable densities to approximately 60% of the future population that would then have more sustainable density types. If one look at the access to job opportunities, then a similar picture emerged. This is the walkability to job opportunities currently, and then in future, that would increase significantly to about above 40% of the population. So it becomes very clear what it is that one needs to do, what are the actions that one needs to take within the city, and also what the resulting effect would be if one would invest in that way. Another example is the city of Korog in Tajikistan that we've been working on. It's more of a resilience exercise that's been done. There's high risks in terms of avalanches, rockfalls, flooding that are evident in that particular area. But for the first time, we've quantified it. And we know that it's about 5,500 people that are being affected by the current risk areas, and also what the size of that area would be. We also looked at what the infrastructure issues are within the area for each piece of infrastructure, basically, looking at where the deficits are for sewer, and especially water came out as key areas where there's under provision or where the water network is so old that it's totally dysfunctional. And to start to understand what's below the ground becomes important as well. The population density has been mapped to get a clear understanding of where people live, but then also to do the dynamic analysis of accessibility to services, schools, health facilities, parks, and open spaces, and to get an idea of where are the areas that are well provided for and where are the areas, these hatched areas, are to a greater or lesser extent underprovided for within for the populations that live in those areas. And that then is exacerbated by poor connectivity across the river, and generally poor circulation that provides access. And that provides a kind of a dynamic understanding of the city, of not just what is there, but how it actually functions. And these processes, it's not a data-rich environment. It's not as if there were these plentiful data, but through working sessions with the community, with professionals that work for the city, other agencies as well that work in the area, we build up maps in processes like these, where we sit together and ask the questions of where are the services in good condition, where not, what happens if people want to move from one area of the city to another. And basically these data sets were built up from those kind of conversations. And when one presents these kind of things to high-level decision makers like the governor and the mayor and so forth, they understand it. They see the city for the first time. They get an understanding that is based on good evidence. And then the strategic responses are far easier to actually get to and to also convince people of. In this case, we looked at what are the areas for possible densification. They had a proposal for a northern extension on this side of the city. And we looked together with them at what are the opportunities for more internal. Land is quite scarce, it's quite hemmed in by mountains, for better densification. And it changes this densification map potentially to one that looks like that. So that brings another level of understanding in terms of the strategy. If one then look at the movement network and add to that to say, how do one get these areas of higher densification and intensity to have better access? And then look also at the green network, non-motorized transportation and walkability within these areas, and incorporate that into the mix of the plan. One gets to more of an overall strategy of saying, where are the key nodal areas or centralities that can be developed, and what can be done within those to make the city more resilient, to cater for future development, and so forth. And you'll remember that this is also an area where the water network had to be replaced, but it's also an area for future intensification. And instead of doing a future settlement in the north of the city, it would be far better to, whilst you are replacing the infrastructure in this area, just replace it with slightly bigger pipes for water at a fraction of the cost, and then accommodate the future growth rather in this area, which would be far more sustainable and far more cost effective, especially from an infrastructure maintenance point of view. Of course, once again, these things need to be detailed out a little bit further. So we've done a more detailed indication of what the land budgets would be for this area, what can be accommodated, and also give a more visual idea of what this future look like. How do you transform the city from this where there's a major issue with traffic to something that's more walkable and integrated and better for both residents and business and the movement within the area? How do you take underdeveloped areas within the city and harness the potential of these to create new enclaves of development that are more mixed, better connected and more sustainable within the city? So it is really something that from the base of a good understanding, one would provide a clear understanding of what it is that needs to be done and what can be achieved with that. The last example I want to use is from the city of Johannesburg, which is more at a metropolitan scale, where 3 options for development were looked at, business as usual. One where there's connecting corridors right to the edge of the marginalized areas, and one where there's a more compact multi-centrality example that's been used. But once again, those were supported by evidence in terms of, from those three scenarios, the cost of traveling time, the carbon per capita as well, the energy cost associated with that. And in all these cases, this one aligned by the green, that option was the best, but it was also supported by saying, well, if one develop in this way, what can be done from the current, where there's a very low percentage of access to public transportation systems, to a future where that situation could drastically change, and where more than 60% of people could have readily access to a public transportation system, and of course all the access to facilities within that walking distance. The last point I want to make, and why it's so important to have this kind of strategic and dynamic view of urban areas, and to make sure that you get to priority areas for development, is really because you need to start to influence the investment opportunities and the capital budgets of cities. In that sense, from the framework of the city, there were three key priority areas identified. One is for future development, for future capacity and future urbanization, which is this blue area, and it's all along the public transit system that's been put in. It's a BRT system together with rail, to build new city around that. The other one was to look at the marginalized areas, the vulnerable communities, some of them informal settlements around the city, which are mostly at the edge, but that had needed upgrading of services to at least get up to a livability standard. And the other one was the focus on economic growth centers within the city. Now, those, if one put them together on a map, these are the key areas that represent those three strategies there. And these became the areas that, in terms of a spatially targeted and priority system, started to influence the capital budget. Of course, these high-level maps and plans needs to be developed into more detailed maps for larger areas or for strategic areas, and each of these areas were developed, and at every level of planning, the key activities and interventions and projects are spelled out, and it goes down right down to a precinct level as well. But the result of this process was really that the approved 3-year capital budget, this was from 2017, and every dot here represents a project from the 23 entities in the city that are doing capital works. And one can clearly see the relationship between where capital is being spent within the city and what the strategic plans are, or the strategic areas for investment are, and how that filters back into the plan at these different levels. So the importance really are that if you don't have these key areas and can focus the development and using a spatially target or an area-based approach to capital investment, then capital happens everywhere. And it's not focused enough to actually make the changes that one would need to move towards more sustainable and resilient cities. The other advantage is that you can now spatialize your budget. So you understand how much funding are being spent in these different areas. And it's all because of a strategic development process that stitches together all the different areas, from creating an understanding, creating a clear strategy for development, and then making sure that the investment are related to that, and that there's a clear understanding politically from all stakeholders and residents and society in general of what it is that the city is doing and why. And in creating that kind of understanding, I think that's how one could go forward and really move towards the SDGs. So the point I want to leave you with is really that we need to try and get planning to be more influential in order to achieve the SDGs. It can't be something that people would take cognizance of only sometimes, or if it's in their interest. It needs to be something that drives development and that transforms our cities into better places for people to live and work in, and better places for the environment, and deals with climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation and sharing a lot of international examples with us, that how strategic planning has helped achieving better sustainable solutions, sustainable models in different contexts. I think these examples are going to inform a lot of cities in terms of what could be different approaches from a strategic perspective, how urban planning can be looked at, and how this could be integrated with investment planning and capital budgeting within the cities. So thank you very much for sharing these ideas and knowledge with our audience today. Thank you. So I would now like to move to the last part of our discussion today. First of all, I would like to thank you all the panelists for sharing these examples where data-driven approach has led to integrated planning of climate smart cities. I would request our audience to post any questions for our panelists or any comments or suggestions which you have. So we have a question from Shravani, which is for Katrina. So Katrina, Shravani has asked, could you delve more on how to translate projects in solid waste, wastewater, and water resource management into initiatives for GHG emission reduction, as it is one of the stated goals for the CEAP project? Thank you.
Hello, hi. Certainly. Well, when we talk about the calculation of waste sector and how it contributes to the greenhouse gases, what we essentially do is we break down the waste mass into relevant waste fractions and then multiply that by their corresponding life cycle conversion factors. I know that's maybe a bit technical, but it's essentially there is a global protocol standard, which is, I would say, globally recognized methodology for calculating the greenhouse gases from different sector. And there you can refer to what I have just shortly now described on how do we go about calculating the impact of waste sector.
Thank you,
Katrina. And maybe I can complement further when it comes to, in particular, interventions within the context of Sustainable Cities Integrated Approach Pilot. We are also taking into account, for instance, the energy source that is in most of the pilot projects being replaced by the renewable energy source. So that is another way where CO2 is being mitigated. Also, we are taking into account what we call side benefits. So for instance, in case of Guntur, where we are looking at electrification of waste collection fleet, we are looking at the air quality as a side effect. So for instance, when it comes to black carbon and short-lived pollutants, how they would be impacting on the shorter term the air quality within the city, and on the longer term also on the greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you, Katrina. Shravani, I hope that answers your question. Katrina, I have a follow-on question for you. So we have seen that CIAP project is focusing on integrated projects. And in terms of capital investment planning, what do you think cities can do to have a better, a larger impact on greenhouse gas emissions? Because pilot project is kind of a demonstration. So if they want to have a citywide impact, or they want to reduce GHG emissions at a citywide scale, what do you think can work in Indian context based on your experience?
No, thank you for this question. It is very important one, and it's also considering the scale up that we are trying to also achieve beyond this project, right? So therefore, we are also implementing a set of municipal financing activities, and one of these activities include climate smart capital investment planning, which essentially helps cities to prioritize climate interventions, or what we call climate smart investment projects. So set of projects which are integrating climate smart measures. So I think Herman has in his presentation indicated a very great example. So there is a new pipeline system being implemented, and just by increasing that investment a little bit, it can accumulate potential increase in rainfall in future. So this kind of small interventions, which are not that costly, and these kind of projects that integrate these inventions, are to be prioritized through the methodology that we are proposing. And all 5 cities have already established their investment committees that will have experience in recognizing that kind of investments, and that will have then knowledge also to, for instance, say, well, this is the investment that we really need, but can we please add this simple measure which will make that investment climate smart and ready for the potential impact that the city might face. So I think this is something that goes beyond the 5 pilot investments that we are doing in 5 cities. So it's really about future planning, how to make smart choices, which investments to prioritize, and how to improve potential investments that are required but need to be climate safe and climate proof.
Thank you, Katrina. I think that's a very interesting approach. And in fact, if we start looking at climate smart budgeting, then probably we could have a greater focus on how do we align our capital investment projects with climate action. Thank you. So we have another comment coming from Sricharan Gullapelli. I'll just, so it's a comment, so I'll just build on top of it. Harman, I would like to address this to you. You spoke about strategic planning and its importance, and you are already aware that in India we follow master planning process and regional planning process and local area planning process. So how do you think this strategic planning could actually be integrated with the existing legal framework that we have in place? What could be the approaches which the Indian cities could look at?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it is a really important question, and we experience that in many other cities that we work with as well. And I think the idea within following this process in SCIAP is it's not a replacement for master planning. It's not a replacement for what is required in terms of the legislative framework. It's another layer of strategic information and strategic recommendations that can assist, as was indicated, for decision making in generally, but also when these plans get reviewed, then it's good to then take these things into consideration, these recommendations that's been made from a more strategic side, and to build it into the master planning or even the neighborhood planning, and to pull that through. So it acts almost as a strategic layer within a city that can be used for their future planning or for general decision making and discussions within within the city, as well as almost a policy document that takes it forward. I think the other benefit that it brings is that it provides a clear data set of very relevant information that these cities can use and build on in the future. And if one look at something like the VLRs and the voluntary reviews that are happening for the SDGs, this becomes excellent information sets to inform those studies that are being done as well.
Thank you, Herman. And so I also have a question for you, Paramita, but in interest of time, I'll reserve my question for now and I can connect with you offline. We are already 15 minutes past our scheduled time. So I would like to bring this to closure now. And on behalf of UN Habitat India office, I would like to thank all the panelists for their great insights and for fostering this very relevant discussion. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all the participants and the organizing team who generously helped us to make this event come together to become a success. We will share the proceedings of this discussion on our website and over email and intend to get back to you for further feedback. If you are looking forward to implementing the data-driven integrated planning in your city, please reach out to us. Before you exit the session, I'll request you to take 5 minutes to fill the feedback survey on the screen. You can scan the QR code through your smartphone and fill the survey. It will help us organizing future discussions in your areas of interest. And I wish you a good day and stay safe. Thank you very much for being here with us. It's been a pleasant experience and a very good learning experience for all of us. Thank you, and thank you panelists for taking out time and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.